Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Radha Bhagi Gopi Jana Jaya Gopi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Om Jnanatimrandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing and today finishing chapter 28 of the 4th canto, titled Puranjana Becomes a Woman in His Next Life. What? So yesterday we heard about how Puranjana's who obtaining a female body was given the name Vaidarbhi. Her husband Malayadvaja, King Malayadvaja, went to the forest to perform devotional austerities. She accompanied him, and then she sadly had to see him leave his body, and she prepared a funeral pyre to cremate him, his body, and then she was preparing to enter into the funeral pyre. But an unknown friend came. And who was that friend? Paramatma. Yeah, the Paramatma appeared in the form of a Brahmana and gave some good instructions. So we're continuing with those instructions. We're going to circle back and hear a little bit more about something Prabhupada was saying in the previous purports on the topic of the spiritual master. Hey! So we're starting with text 61, we're going to text 61 to 65. Maya hesha maya shrishta yat pumam samstriyam satim manyase no bhayam yadvai hamsao pashyavayorgatim. So the Brahmana is speaking. Sometimes you think yourself a man, sometimes a chaste woman, and sometimes a neutral eunuch. This is all because of the body, which is created by the illusory energy. This illusory energy is my potency. And actually, both of us, you and I, are pure spiritual identities. Now just try to understand this. I am trying to explain our factual position. So it's helpful to remember we've had so many lives, and each time we become absorbed because of this is called asmita, this sense of I am this. This is the false ego, induces us to think asmita, this is me. Each time, every single time, this is me, this is me. We can see in our present life how many different identities we've gone through, isn't it? How many different phases we go through in terms of our identity, who we think we are, the opinions we have, the goals, the desires we have. When I was in high school, I was a drummer. That was a part of my identity. I'm a drummer. I took pride in it. I practiced. That was my identity. And then after some years, it wasn't so important to me anymore. When I was in middle school, when I was like 12 years old, punk rock, that was like my identity, was Blink-182, Green Day, Goldfinger. Who else? Those were some of the three big ones for me. And then after 8 years, when I was 20 and I was in college, I didn't listen to that music anymore. I didn't care for it. I had other bands that I liked. I knew my asmita had changed. The this is me-ness was totally transformed, even in this one lifetime. What to speak of from one lifetime to the next? So it helps, because otherwise we're stuck on this bodily concept of life. We think of ourselves in terms of the physical body, and we think of everyone else in terms of the physical body. So much so that we can hate people just because of the color of their skin or because of their nationality. This is called racial bigotry or prejudice. That just because of somebody's skin color or because of their nationality, you hate them. Isn't that absurd? So much so that you would, even in many instances throughout history, you would kill them without even knowing who they are. Kill them just like cutting down a shaft of wheat or corn. Just cut them down, like cutting down a tree, without any remorse because of their skin color or their country, their national background. So this is how much the bodily concept of life deludes us and covers our real intelligence. So we can recognize that this present lifetime is no different from those other lifetimes that now I have no connection with. I don't remember them. I don't have nostalgia for them. It's helpful. We have to become detached from this present bodily situation so we can accept life circumstances and opinions and desires that will bring us towards a spiritual destination. Right now, our asmita, this is me, causes us to accept values, desires, opinions that are all orbiting around my present physical situation. Jai Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Hare Bol, Hare Bol.
Who is it?
Oh, there's Francesca's there, B is there, Shay Marie is there, and Bhakti Pepe is there. Hare Krishna. So, all of these desires and opinions and all these things, they orbit around, they circle around the false ego, and unless we shatter this illusion of being this body that we realize I'm not this body. If we don't realize that, then we won't really be able to give up our own opinions and desires and so on to accept Krishna's opinions and Krishna's desires and Krishna's values. So that's the essential point, is that having taken shelter of a spiritual master, now I'm accepting that this spiritual master is like my master, and I'm his indentured servant. I'm completely dependent on him, and he has every right to chastise me, correct me, and engage me in any type of service for the pleasure of the Lord. We're not going to get into what happens if the spiritual master isn't qualified. That's a different class. That's an important class. Maybe we can get into it in the discussion if we have time. How to recognize that your spiritual master is qualified in the first place before you take shelter of him. But having taken shelter, then we should be confident when we take that step that yes, I'm taking shelter of a qualified guru, so that when the time comes to actually put your money where your mouth is, as they say, and actually show your submission that you desire to be of service to Krishna, that you'll be able to do that. So we got some notes here. Krishna, Krishna.
I have a comment.
Yeah, Madhuri, please share your comment.
Just mentioning this thing about racism, racial bigotry. I've thought this often about how, at least, in the short history of America, at least, this kind of, slave culture of whites.
Do you want to come speak into the mic?
I should take the mic down.
Thank you, Lord.
Just how you, I just thought about this frequently, like, that, and this slave cult, like, in American history of the war, wars of oppression between white and black.
Yeah.
And I frequently thought it's like, somebody who maybe was like a plantation owner or whatever, oppressing blacks and enslaving them, and then they take birth as a black and they become oppressed, and like exactly,
and
and it just goes on and on.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a nice segue into this point from Prabhupada's purport here. This is from text 61 purport. The process by which one can return home back to Godhead is bhakti yoga, sometimes called sanatana dharma. Instead of accepting a temporary occupational duty based on the material body, one should take to the process of sanatana dharma or bhakti yoga so that he can put an end to this perpetual bondage in material bodies and return home back to Godhead. As long as human society works on the basis of false material identification, all the so-called advancements of science and philosophy are simply useless. They only serve to mislead human society. Andhayatandhar upaniyamana. In the material world, the blind simply lead the blind. So as Madhavi is saying, rather than accept some cause based on material considerations, like putting an end to slavery or wage equality or protecting the environment, all of these things, our primary focus should always be on the supreme cause, which is our own self-realization. If you're drowning in the ocean, what are you going to do to help other people who are drowning? Not very much. You can maybe just try to distract them with some stories. But if you really want to help people, you need a boat. So this Hare Krishna movement is like the boat. And if we're 100% in the boat, that everything that we do every day is somehow contributing to our spiritual health and our spiritual progress, then when we want to help people in other ways, we'll be able to actually do that. That when we take up philanthropical activities like feeding the hungry or serving the poor by building houses or different things, these are nice activities to do. And anyone who's in a householder situation, who's part of a community, it's his duty to give to that community in some way, to give back, to help his community, just like a member of the family is responsible for the welfare of the whole family. Similarly, a member of any local community is responsible for the welfare of that local community, and they should do what they can what's in their power to help one another. That's just basic human decency. But none of those causes should ever become one's primary focus in life, because one won't actually feel satisfaction for themselves, nor will they really be able to help other people unless Krishna is at the center. We'll move on to text 62. My dear friend, I, the super soul, and you, the individual soul, are not different in quality, for we are both spiritual. You are qualitatively not different from me in your constitutional position. Just try to consider this subject. Those who are actually advanced scholars who are in knowledge do not find any qualitative difference between you and me. So this comes up in many places in the scriptures, the oneness between the Lord and the jiva. But we have to understand all of these statements emphasizing oneness in the context of the entire Vedic literature, which also contains many statements that emphasize the difference, the distinction between the Lord and the jiva. For example, if the living entity and the Lord were absolutely one and non-different, then there would be no sense of, no need to pray to the Lord or submit to the Lord, because you yourself would have full potency to get yourself out of the material bondage. More than that, you wouldn't actually fall into bondage in the first place. The Lord never comes under illusion, ever. The living entity, because of being minute, like a ray of the sun, comes under illusion of the material potency. But the material energy is always in a servant position, a servile position towards the Supreme Lord. So there's no way for the individual living entity to reasonably claim, I am God. That's a insane claim. So when the scripture says that you and I are one, Krishna says you and I are one, it means qualitatively, just like a father and son are one. They're one in their bond of in that relationship, that the son is so dear to the father that the father is willing to practically do anything for his welfare. To work thousands, hundreds and thousands of hours of his life to maintain the child and give everything to the child and not expect anything in return. And similarly, the son is so indebted to the father that he's willing to sacrifice his interests and sacrifice his selfish, opinions and this and that to submit to the father and please the father and serve the father, so that the father can to show his gratitude, his debt of gratitude. These are just analogies, as we mentioned yesterday. No analogy is perfect. Every analogy has some flaw, because it's taking something else to try to understand the actual object of understanding. But it helps us get an idea. Prabhupada would say, one in their desire. They're one in desire. That is what it means to be one with the Lord. One in purpose. The Lord exists for his pleasure, and we exist for his pleasure. The Lord is authorized to be selfish, because he's the center of everything. Everything is Krishna-centered, so he can also be Krishna-centered. But actually, because he also identifies his devotees as his, belonging to him, then he even will put their happiness above his own consideration, in one sense. That's Krishna's mood of being a Bhakta Vatsala, the maintainer of his devotees. So this is Vaishnav oneness, this idea of one in purpose. And so back to this point of that some people make this claim, well, I am God. It's an insane claim, because God, by definition, every religion accepts that God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, among other things. So in his manifestations, his different incarnations, the Lord exhibits these qualities in different ways, showing that he actually is the controller of this energy known as the material world. It's his energy. Just like right now, I have a body, and one of my energies is my voice. So now, you, Prahlad, you can't speak through my voice. You can't make my body speak. Can you? You can't do it. Just say no, I can't do it.
No.
Right? You can't do it.
Yeah.
If you were Krishna, you could do that. Because we're like puppets to him. He's in control of his energy. He could make me unable to speak. Abraham in the Bible was stricken mute. He was made unable to speak. Madhavi, isn't it? That was Abraham. He was stricken mute when he didn't believe that the Lord would give his wife a...
No, that's in the New Testament. I mean, maybe it's in the Old Testament also, but it's Zechariah.
Zechariah, father of John the Baptist, was stricken mute. The Lord is the controller of all of our bodies. He can take away our voice, or he can cause us to speak. But we can't do that. So, therefore, we're not God. It's simple. It's very simple. It just requires some sanity, some honesty. I am not the control of this material energy, but Krishna is the controller. And he says that so many times in the Bhagavad Gita, in so many different places, in so many different ways, he says. he says. So, Prabhupada makes another point in the purport. We're on text 62 still, that, this is from text 63. So we'll move on to text 63 and then we'll hear Prabhupada's additional point, how we can test. Because we might be confused. It's reasonable to become confused from time to time. It's, let's say, expected. It's expected to become confused because we're in this world. It's a very confusing place, and there's a lot of other people who are confused. And so, just by being around them, we also become confused. So, if we think that we're God, that's a state of confusion because most people the average person who has that thought cross their mind, it arises in the form of like a question, like, well, maybe I'm God. Maybe that's what God is. It's just everyone is God, maybe. And that uncertainty in itself is another strong evidence that we're not, because God would not be uncertain. God is omniscient, is the knower of everything. What to speak of his own godhood. Anyway, Prabhupada's going to make another point that's very, very good. Text 63. Yatha purusha atmanam ekam adarsha chakrusho vidha bhutam aveksheta tathaivantaram avayo. As a person sees the reflection of his body in a mirror to be one with himself and not different, whereas others actually see two bodies, so in our material condition in which the living being is affected and yet not affected, there is a difference between God and the living entity. So an intelligent person knows that the object in the mirror and the actual body are two distinct entities. The object in the mirror is flat, just an image, like a photograph, and the body is three-dimensional. So that's just one difference. So similarly, there's a distinction. There's a real distinction between the Lord and the living entity, although some people might mistake that they're non-different. The Lord is the energetic, and the living entity is the energy. Make sense? Do you have a question about that?
Well, I have this thing in my mind about the point that here is being made is that qualitatively we are the same.
Yeah.
But the discussion is going, it seems that we go toward, no, there's a difference. And where the difference seems to be pointing over here is in the. So if we are going to, maybe there's a reason why it's important to accept this qualitatively, being qualitatively the same, and not dwelling in the, oh yeah, we're slightly, God is better than us, but maybe focus on the quantity is what makes the difference over here, and maybe that will have a point here to help us and to understand or to advance.
Yeah.
Spiritual.
We're following Srila Prabhupada's commentary. He's emphasizing the difference. I'll give you one line from Srila Prabhupada's commentary here. He's saying, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, there is no difference between the body and the soul. But for the living entity who's in illusion, he's seeing difference between his body and his soul because there is a difference. But the soul and the body are two distinct tattvas. But the Lord is his body, but you are not the body. So until we understand the difference, we can't also appreciate the oneness. Both of them have to be understood together, side by side. And I'm emphasizing the difference for the general public, because that's a big confusion right now. That's going on, that's out there, that people don't, they mistake, because when Krishna says this, you and I are one. Yeah, it's important to understand that, but we have to be careful. We have to be very careful about it. Because when you say quantitative difference, what does that really mean? Quantity of consciousness. We can understand marbles, 1 marble or 10 marbles or 100 marbles, but what does quantity of consciousness mean? What does that really mean? What does that imply? So it's difficult to fully appreciate. And having said that, yeah, you're right. We should be able to also appreciate the oneness, which is that I'm also fully spiritual. I'm a spiritual being. I'm eternal, and I'm naturally full of knowledge and full of bliss, such as Ananda. And in the Ishopanishad, the devotee prays like this, Lord, you are like the sun, and so am I. And so we are also sun-like, but the experience of our own existence, self-realization, can be very intoxicating. So if we don't have this firmly fixed in our mind, this spirit of submission to the Lord, then there's a constant risk that as we become more aware of our own existence as spiritual beings, we will think, now I am experiencing God. Now I'm in the presence of the Lord, and now I am also like a Lord. I'm also like a God. I deserve respect. I deserve worship, and so on. Because the experience of our own consciousness, our own self, is intoxicating. It's a type of pleasure, this Brahmananda or Atmananda. There's this Sanskrit saying Atma Rama, one who just takes pleasure in his own self. But we don't want to ever get stuck in that rut of Brahman awareness and think that now that I've realized something of my own spiritual existence, my qualitative oneness with the Lord, that I stop there. The difference is also important. It's Veda Abheda. Both of them have to be appreciated simultaneously. Neither one trumps the other, but both have to be understood together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and here the comparison is being made to Paramatma specifically. So in terms of the qualities that, and yes, and one has to be in the pure stage to be able to say that we are, see that difference, I should say, the quality, we have the same qualities. And
let me give you the mic.
No, that's it.
Okay. All right. Anyway, I'm grateful for your comment. Thank you. All right. Prabhupada gives the analogy of fire. This is from the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Fire has different features. There is flame, the sparks, and the smoke. Although these are one in quality, there is still a difference between the fire, the flame, the spark, and the smoke. The living entity becomes conditioned, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead is different because he does not become conditioned at any point. although, moving on a little bit, although both are spirit, there is always a difference. So both of them should be emphasized. It's not that we ever emphasize one over the other. Both the difference and non-difference need to be understood. And the analogy of fire and the heat, or fire and the sparks, or the Father and the Son, these are all very good analogies. And if we just try to understand these analogies, then we'll eventually get it. All right, text 64. Evam sa manaso hamso hamsena pratichodita svasthastad vyabicharena nashtam apapunasmritim. In this way, both swans live together in the heart. When the one swan is instructed by the other, he is situated in his constitutional position. This means he regains his original Krishna consciousness, which was lost because of his material attraction. So the emphasis here is that we have to take the subordinate position. If we're too much thinking of our qualitative oneness with the Lord, then we'll wonder, why should we submit? What's the real need for submission? You know, if me and Krishna are on the same level, why should I serve him? Shouldn't I get something out of the deal too? So that's the risk of veering too far in the side of the oneness. Here it's this translation is very clear that one swan is meant to be the instructing swan, and one swan is meant to be the listening swan. That when the Lord gives instructions, we want to hear it. Krishna doesn't need our service, in one sense. In one sense, he really wants us, you know, he would love for us to engage in a loving exchange with him. But he is our maintainer. It's not that we ever become indispensable to him in the same sense that in the same way that he is indispensable to us. And therefore Lord Chaitanya prays Ashlishtimam Parvadatam Pinashtimam Rashinan Marvacham Kurotu Yutatata Bhavidam Prana Tastu Saeva Naparaha. Yeah, no other. You, my Lord, even if you neglect me, or you trample me under your feet, you crush me in your embrace, you make me brokenhearted by not being present before me. All of these things, still, you are my worshipful Lord. That's the proper relationship between the servant and the master. Between the beloved, the lover and the beloved. So that's what we're trying to emphasize here. That's all. All right, here. So Prabhupada writes, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna comes down, Avatara, to deliver his devotees and kill the demons. He also gives his sublime instructions in the form of Bhagavad Gita. The individual soul has to understand his position by the grace of the Lord and the spiritual master, because the text of Bhagavad Gita cannot be understood simply by academic qualifications. One has to learn Bhagavad Gita from a realized soul. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. Thus, one has to select a bona fide spiritual master and become enlightened to his original consciousness. In this way, the individual soul can understand that he is always subordinate to the Lord. That's an excerpt from the purport of text 64. So this is our natural position, is to be submissive to the Lord. And this is the last verse. Barhishman etad adhyatmam parokshena pradarshitam yat paroksha priyo devo bhagavan vishvabhavanaha. My dear King Prachinabarhi, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, is celebrated to be known indirectly. Thus, I have described the story of Puranjana to you. Actually, it is an instruction for self-realization. So, as he's concluding his teachings, Narada Muni confesses, actually, this story all along has been a lesson for you. I've been trying to teach you something. And in the next chapter, King Kuchinabarhi is going to say, please, my dear Narada, I can understand this is a lesson. Can you please help me understand it? Please break it down for me. So we've been fortunate that we've had the commentaries and translations of our acharyas so that we've understood all along what's going on. But in the next chapter, King Kuchinabarhi is going to get this whole scoop on this story, this allegory. And Narada Muni says he is celebrated to be known indirectly. Yat paroksha priyo devo Bhagavan Vishva Bhavana, cause of all causes. Throughout most of the Vedas, Krishna is spoken of only indirectly. It's only in the Srimad-Bhagavatam that we find the complete revelation of him in a direct way. So that's why we primarily study the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And all of the literatures of the six Goswamis are based on Srimad-Bhagavatam, or we could say expansions of Srimad-Bhagavatam. The Srimad-Bhagavatam is Krishna, just as the deity is Krishna. The holy name is Krishna. Srimad-Bhagavatam is Krishna. So I want to go back to one purport that we did not read this particular excerpt. This is a very nice excerpt from Prabhupada's. This is the first verse that we covered yesterday, text 51. Because Prabhupada is concluding on this point of submission to the spiritual master, and this whole allegory, it also, this episode, this history, it shows how much we are dependent on the spiritual master, on the self-realized devotee, to get any foothold and make any forward movement in our spiritual life. Because if it wasn't for Narada Muni, King Kuchinabarhi would just continue his life of sense enjoyment. Who else was going to come and tell him this whole long story? It takes a lot of creativity, a lot of effort and time to preach. And Narada Muni is making that sacrifice for the benefit of this king. Who else was going to do that for him? So similarly, our spiritual masters are taking on this great sacrifice of accepting disciples and doing so many things to help them, writing books, giving lectures, answering emails, endlessly working for the welfare of these fallen souls, including us. And so we have to meditate on that every day, how we're indebted to our spiritual masters. And without their mercy, without their help, we would be nowhere. So Prabhupada, he has some very nice comments here on the relationship between the spiritual master and the Lord. This is back in text 51 of the report. Let's just, maybe we'll read it from my phone here. There we go. Sitting with the living entity as witness, the Lord gives him all chances to enjoy himself materially. But whenever there is an opportunity, the Lord gives good counsel and advises the living entity to abandon trying to become happy through material adjustment, and instead turn his face toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender unto him. When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution is tantamount to seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As explained before, this means meeting the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the instruction of the spiritual master. This is technically called Vani Seva. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states in his Bhagavad Gita commentary on the verse Vyavasaya Apnika Buddhir Eke Hakuru Nandana that one should serve the words of the spiritual master. The disciple must stick to whatever the spiritual master orders. Simply by following on that line, one sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the spiritual master is the authorized representative of the Lord. That if I'm serious about serving the Lord, about developing love for God, for Krishna, then I cannot neglect the spiritual master. I cannot neglect Guru. He is my means by which I am able to serve the Lord in this lifetime. It's like an interview of sorts that we're applying for residency in the spiritual world. And so the Lord has sent an ambassador, an emissary, a messenger to come and be with us here and see if we're fit. And by accepting the spiritual master as a non-different representative of the Lord, who is meant for my service, I am meant, who is meant to be served by me, I am meant for his service. When we do that, then that proves to Krishna, yes, this person is actually ready to enter the spiritual world, because he has given all of his life energies for the service of me through the spiritual master. That's a very important point. All right, we'll end there. Any final questions or comments? You want to speak in the mic, or do you want me to just repeat it? Yeah. Mukund is going to bring you the mic. 1 second. Shama, 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 Radhe, Shama, Shama, Shama.
I was just reminded, oh shoot, I just lost it. When you said something about, the living entity, anyway, you were talking for a while about the living entity thinking that they're God, and I remember this purport in the Bhagavad Gita. I don't think you mentioned, it's 1873, and in the purport, it was like life-changing for me, but Srila Prabhupada writes almost exactly what you're saying, but it was just so clear. He says, the living entity's constitutional position is to be a servitor. Hold on, let me find it. The living entity thinks that he is no longer a conditioned soul, but God. He is so unintelligent that he does not think that if he were God, then how could he be in doubt? That he does not consider. So that is the last snare of illusion. And I remember reading that and loving that so much, this concept, because I had actually thought that I was God for some time, and then this point about if the living entity were God, they would never be fearful, they would never be in doubt, because there's no question of them ever losing their position. But the living entity are constantly they're constantly in doubt. So I just I really like that point.
Jai. All right. Thank you, Madhavi. That was really nice. The Prabhupada's the best. He just tells it like it is. Thank God, right? Thank God for Srila Prabhupada telling it like it is. Bhagavad Gita as it is. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Vancha Kalpatarushcha. Vaishnavam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavam